talk about this in my presentation on the IJCTO trial. The IJCTO trial is the only trial that really addresses the question whether we should treat CTOs in stable patients. So what is the rationale? Improvement of symptoms should be on the top of the list. Not only angina, but especially physical limitation is a typical feature of CTO patients. But can we improve prognosis? That is a question that maybe doesn't need to be answered. If we look at the mortality in this largest registry, recent times, the UK registry, you see that the mortality is after 4 years 6% in successful and just about 9.5% in unsuccessful cases. So the mortality is not so high in these patients, and the difference is 2%, but to find an absolute percent difference after 4 years, you need thousands of patients in a randomized trial. And just to remind you that the randomized trial never enrolls the sickest patients. Just look as a comparison on the STEMI registries from Amsterdam. 25% mortality in patients where a CTO is associated with a STEMI in another artery. Look at the Horizons trial, the same association, but on a much lower level. 25% mortality, where there's 5% mortality. So the sick patients are not randomized in the trials. Come back to the mortality in CTOs. This is the mortality rate reported in Open CTO, which is a consecutive registry. So the mortality is in the range of the report from UK. But if you look at the randomized trials, Decision CTO and IJCTO, mortality is much lower. As expected again, sick patients are not enrolled. Mortality improvement cannot be the primary goal of therapy, at least we cannot prove it. But better quality of life is a valid goal of medical therapy in many fields outside of cardiology. So Decision, I still mention it, it will be remarked later again. But I just want to make the point, Decision CTO is not a randomized trial of CTO PCI versus OMT. It looks like, but it is not. Why? Because revascularization of non-CTO lesions was done after randomization. All non-CTO lesions should be treated. So in fact, 70% of PCI was performed also in the OMT arm. And if the people would have looked at the presentation 1 year ago at ACC, they would have realized that indeed the number of stents is 2.0 in OMT and 2.4 in PCI. So it's not a trial comparing PCI with non-PCI. At least CTO PCI did not harm in that trial, and they had a high success rate, but the study's design is completely flawed. So it's no value for deciding to open a CTO or not. The IJCTO trial also included multi-vessel patients, but we took a different approach. CTO location should be in a large artery, and patients with multi-vessel disease should receive PCI before they underwent randomization. So in fact, every patient's non-CTO lesion was already treated if necessary, and then they were randomized. Now we don't have so many patients, 400 just about for randomization in a 2-to-1 fashion. But if we measure metric endpoints like the Seattle Angina Questionnaire, which was our endpoint, then you don't need thousands of patients to have a good result, meaningful result. Optimal medical therapy was standard plus nitrates and more modern anti-anginal medication. And of course, successful and failed cases were included in this intention to treat analysis. In the OMT arm, we had a very low crossover rate. It was just 7%. The patient characteristics were evenly distributed. We had, as expected, a majority of RCA lesions, which is typical. JCTO score is about 1.6 to 1.8, and we had radial approach in 1/3 of patients, retrograde approach in 1/3 of patients, and the success rate was 86.3, which is surprisingly in the same range like the recently published Syntax 2, where also CTOs were included. So this is a very high success rate for a randomized trial. Complications were low. We had no death, no Q-wave MI, only minor complications that could be managed. And this is the endpoint analysis. And you see, cerebral angina questionnaire consists of 5 categories: physical limitation, angina frequency, quality of life, stability, and treatment satisfaction. Treatment satisfaction and stability never changes in none of the trials, not even in COURAGE, the endpoint threshold. If you look at significant increases, again, physical limitation, angina frequency and quality of life were more improved by a significant step in the PCI arm. Again, if we compare a randomized trial with a registry here, open CTO, and I put decision in between, we have higher scores at baseline, for example, 81 for angina frequency in our trial, and 71 in the trial of the open CTO registry. So a score difference of 10, which means less symptomatic patients are included in the randomized trial. That is a fact which is also observed in the Korean trial. But still, the lesson is, and the conclusion, that the power of our study, despite not having a large number of patients, we planned to have 600 and ended up finally with 400. The power is still 81%. The primary endpoint was clearly met. PCI for CTO improved the health status as compared to OMT. And in experienced hands, periprocedural risk was low, and the 12 months MACE rate was comparable to OMT. The long-term safety remains to be evaluated. Actually, we are just concluding the 3-year follow-up. According to our data, this is a randomized trial clearly stating that PCI should be the preferred treatment of patients with CTO and clinical symptoms. Thank you very much.